So there really can be tragic consequences to not planning ahead and having a will or a trust or some sort of estate planning document in place.
Rapper Takeoff's death came suddenly after a game of dice went wrong. But now his parents face off for his assets. What happens now that the singer died without a will? We bring in family law attorney Regina Edwards to break it all down. Welcome to Sidebar presented by Law&Crime. I'm Gillespie. 1 month after famed rapper Takeoff is shot and killed in Houston, reports swirl that his parents are fighting over his assets as he may have died without a will. The 28-year-old Migos rapper was shot and killed in the early morning hours of November 1st. It happened at a private party in Houston, Texas, after an argument broke out during a game of dice. Officials say Takeoff, whose real name is Kershnik Kari Ball, was shot in the head and torso. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, just last week, suspected shooter Patrick Xavier Clark was arrested after investigators say he was working to flee to Mexico. He's now being held on $2 million bond. Meantime, Takeoff's parents are now going head to head to collect assets from his $28 million net worth. Reports say the rapper's parents do not get along and that he died without setting aside a will. Now, to make sense of all of this, we're joined by family law attorney Regina Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us, Regina.
Oh, you're certainly welcome. This is definitely a difficult topic and very timely.
Okay, Regina, let's begin with the basics here. What happens when you die without a will?
Well, that really depends on the state, but in general, it's not a good thing. So when you die without a will, which is also called intestate, then your state's rules really determines what happens with your money. And for most people, that's not really what they would like. So you mentioned that his parents don't get along. There have been other famous people that have passed away without a will, and those cases can really drag on. When Steve McNair was tragically shot, his mother ended up getting evicted from her home because there wasn't enough estate planning in place that would have protected her and have given her that home. So there really can be tragic consequences to not planning ahead and having a will or a trust or some sort of estate planning document in place.
Yeah, so far we've also seen reports that Takeoff's parents are fighting over these assets, but if he doesn't have any children or a spouse, would they then be the logical next step to receive his assets?
Again, that just depends on the state, but each state has default rules in terms of what happens, who gets the money when someone passes away. So that really just depends on the state. But yes, there is a default plan. So if you don't have children, usually it's the parents that it defaults to. But again, that just depends on the state. So if that's not what you want for your assets, then you definitely have to get your wishes in writing, or the state is going to decide for you where your money is going to go.
So, how do we determine which state of these laws to follow? Because where he died was in Texas, but he's actually from Georgia.
It most likely will be Georgia. I assume that he was a resident of Georgia and most of his assets and property would have been located in Georgia. So usually that's where the process is going to begin. It's possible that there may be a jurisdictional argument that another state would take control. But again, that's another reason why to have these things in place, because your estate planning documents can determine if you have a will where you're going to go to probate, or if you have a living trust, you don't even have to go through probate at all. But that's also something that you can plan for ahead of time, so you don't have different states arguing about where these things are going to take place.
So, we kind of talked about this briefly. Like, if you don't have any spouses or children or anything, and you haven't set aside the will, kind of the chronological order of who all of this information or who all of your assets rather would go to. But what about the rest of it? Like any siblings, cousins, aunts, and uncles? Could these people be seeing a piece of the pie too?
Yes, yes. And, if you have a lot of cousins, there's probably one or two of them you don't like. So if you don't want that to be the case, you probably need to get, an estate plan. Howard Hughes, I believe, died with a $2 million estate, and it ended up being divided amongst, I believe, 22 cousins, one of whom who he had never met. So it is possible that it can end up getting distributed to further heirs down the line, some people that you don't know or don't care for. So that definitely can be avoided as well if you plan properly.
So, again, we're talking about this will. If there is no will here, How do we decide what amount goes to who? And could this process even take years in legal fees and court and all of those things to kind of come to a determination how to separate these assets?
Absolutely. It could take years. So the probate process is very long and it's very painful, especially when it's contested. So even when you're going through probate and it's uncontested, it still takes time. There's still attorney's fees involved. But in a contested case, the answer is yes, it can take years. We have to figure out where the assets are, and the court has to determine where those assets go. And if you have parties, in this case, I guess both parents fighting to say that they should be the beneficiaries, eventually the court's going to have to determine it. And the lawyers are going to make a lot of money in this case. There's going to be fees involved, so the estate is going to be whittled down for whoever's left standing at the when the dust settles.
So it sounds like from all of these answers I'm getting from you, the best thing to do is to create a will before you die. Is that something that you would then recommend?
Yes, yes, and people don't like to think about it because, I mean, who wants to think about when they're gonna die? But, I mean, I've got news, it's all coming for us at some point. So it does make sense to plan for it, and of course you can change it if your wishes change down the line, but you're really buying peace of mind for the people you leave behind, and it's not just for wealthy people. So even if you have a small estate, even if it's only $15,000, if you want your family members to have immediate access to that money as soon as you pass away without it getting bled dry by attorneys or fees or taxes or anything like that, then just plan ahead for it. It'll cost a little bit of money up front, but that peace of mind for your family when they're going through the grieving process of not having to deal with these legal issues really will be priceless.
Yeah, that's such a great point, too. Regina, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll continue to follow this case and see what happens. But as Regina just told us, it could take years to see what actually happens. But we'll check back with you again soon.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. You can watch and listen to Law&Crime Sidebar podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you listen. I'll see you next time.